Hello and welcome to the channel where I explore concepts of creativity and the arts, as well as basic psychology, mental health, and how the two connect and relate to one another. Today we're breaking down the concept of what it is to have a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. What does that actually mean? What are the benefits of having a growth mindset? And then I also want to break down these traits called grit and resilience. What are they? What do they mean? And what is the role that they play in all of this? So we're going to go through some definitions, look at what are common traits of people who really have adopted this kind of growth mindset, and then what are some techniques, what are some things we can do in our own lives if we would like to develop this further for ourselves. A lot of my information in today's video came from this really great article from Positive Psychology. I will link that in the description. And we're breaking down a lot of the research of Angela Duckworth. So I will put a little more information for her and her research in the description as well. You can check that out if you're interested. Otherwise, let's get into it. So first off, what does it mean to have a fixed versus a growth mindset? And we're going through a few terms today, and I want to make sure they come out clear. So mindset meaning how do you perceive elements of the world or yourself? So to have a fixed mindset means that you believe some element of your character or your abilities is just set the way it is. It won't change. Growth means you believe that you can adapt it and change it. So if I have a fixed mindset about sports, it means that I've felt that I'm not very good at sports. I've never had maybe very athletic tendencies, and I don't believe that I'm going to get good at them. I just sort of leave it there. If I have a growth mindset about, say, basketball, it means that I could say, well, maybe I'm not very good at basketball yet, but I know where I want to get with it. I know I can get better. I'm going to practice. I'm going to put in some work, and I will improve. That's literally all it is. It means that you believe you can improve in some area in your life. And some people will tend to have predominantly fixed or growth mindsets, but every person can have it in different ways for themselves, right? So I may have a fixed mindset about basketball, but maybe I have a really strong growth mindset about music because I have experience training and finding success and growth in that area. So I feel like there's a great deal of potential there. Most of us have a mix. We can also have this kind of a mindset about ourselves, like our traits as people. So maybe I've been told that I'm not a very good listener. And I just think that's part of who I am as a person, and other people need to kind of deal with that if they're going to associate with me. And so I don't try to improve my listening skills because I think it's really ingrained. Or maybe I'm an absolute introvert and I never want to go out and talk to other people because it's always been hard for me and I just take it for granted, rather than deciding that if I wanted to, I could actually adjust and develop my personality. We can actually all grow and change, not only in areas of skill and intellect, but in our very personalities and who we are as people as well. So now to get into the idea of grit and resilience, and I love learning about these concepts. This is what's coming from Angela Duckworth's research. So she defines grit as the tendency to sustain interest in and effort toward very long-term goals. So if you have grit, it means you're able to set your sights high on something you want to achieve and keep going after it. Sounds pretty simple, and you'd think anybody can have grit if they want, which is kind of true. Now, resilience goes with it, and that is the ability to bounce back after some kind of failure or setback. The two really work together. You kind of need both. You can have grit and like really lofty goals and start doing the work to get there, but if you don't have any resilience, then as soon as you hit a snag or some sort of failure, you'll just kind of switch gears and pick a new goal, and you won't have actually demonstrated that much grit because you really never made it where you were going. So you need both. It's another thing that we can see. Some people naturally tend to be really gritty, or maybe just from a young age they've had a lot of practice kind of overcoming challenges. So many hero stories where someone faces like enormous difficulties and they're at a total disadvantage, but they fight and they really keep pushing and they're just not taken down even when everyone around them tells them it's never going to work. They've got grit, right? And they've got resilience because even though they keep failing and they keep failing, they just keep going. And at the end of the movie, whichever story it is, they succeed. That's kind of the hero's journey. It's a story we really love. And they're showing absolutely a growth mindset the entire time because they're determined to get to this lofty goal that they have. So this is how it works, and this is something that we want in our own lives so that we can better be the hero of our own story. So common traits of people who have great grit and resilience, who have really embraced a growth mindset. They tend to embrace challenges. They would say, that looks difficult, but I really want to get there, let's go. They persist in spite of difficulties, even when things are hard. They want to keep going. They make use of and accept criticism, and this is important. You can't continually work towards a big goal if you're not willing to have other people give you difficult feedback. So you have to be able to hear what your weaknesses are. And a lot of high achieving people who have shown a lot of grit and resilience seek out criticism. They want to hear what they're not doing well enough because they know they can't always see the full picture. So making use of criticism, seeing effort as necessary. These people are not really going to plan or expect to win the lottery. That's not how they live their lives. They know it's going to take a lot of work to get where they want to go, and they're ready for that. They probably even kind of appreciate that fact, because then once you've achieved whatever it is you're working towards, you have a sense of all the work and all the effort it took to get there. And they take inspiration and lessons from other people's success, so they don't get really bogged down by envy. They don't get frustrated when other people do better than them. They look at what the other person is doing, they're impressed by it, they appreciate it, and they say, what can I do to better emulate what this person has already achieved? So then what are a few things we can do to adopt this and become a little more gritty and resilient and have more of a growth mindset in our own lives? And I've got a list of some eight things we can try and apply. The first one, in general, is to seek out risk. And I don't necessarily mean to go skydiving or rock climbing without a rope. Not so much physical risk, but more like any kind of social or personal risk where we might fail, or we might risk being judged and have other people see that. So most of us have a deeply ingrained fear of rejection. It's very human, very natural, but there is a ton to be said for deliberately pushing against that fear. You may have heard of these stories of 100 days of rejection. This fellow Jason Comely set out to be rejected intentionally for 100 days in a row because he felt that he was really crippled by his fear of rejection and he couldn't freely go out and speak to people and have new experiences. He would intentionally ask people absurd things so that they would tell him no, and then he felt like he was succeeding because he was overcoming his own fear. And this other fellow, Jia Jiang, has done the same thing. It's kind of a movement now. You can read more about it. I'll put a link to some of their information there as well. Their stories are really interesting. So if in some small way you can make a habit of challenging yourself and trying to push a little outside your comfort zone and know that you might get some criticism, you might get negative feedback or have people reject you in some way, that's really good. That's how you build resilience. That's how you get used to bouncing back. If you're less afraid of it in the first place, it's much easier to bounce back. The second one, really closely linked to this, is we could try and push our social bubble a little bit. So that might mean literally just talking to a new person, having a conversation with someone on a topic that you're not used to discussing, right? Just push a little bit outside your usual social comfort zone, because we are hugely social creatures. Humans, it's like our superpower is being social and aware of one another. And consequently, there's a lot of risk for us there. So it doesn't always seem like it. Like we might think, oh, I could take like a financial risk here, or I could take a business risk. But taking a social risk is usually harder and might actually have more payoff. So you can push your social circle a little bit. The third one is to try breaking big goals down into small pieces. And this is just very practical advice for what it means to have some grit, right? Which is where you set a big goal and you look after how to get it. And be intentional about it. Acknowledge that if you do this small task every day for 2 weeks, like that's a big success. That's how you do it. That's how we get things done. So the practice of breaking big goals down and walking through those steps. Number 4 is really interesting. We can also aim to make very deliberate decisions. Oftentimes when we're faced with something difficult or uncomfortable, what we want to do is kind of passively like step back, edge around the decision, try to let someone else maybe take the reins from us because it's uncomfortable and we don't want to do something wrong and be rejected or have any failure follow us. But that's not a really bold way to move through life. We're not really taking charge. We're not trying to grow. So if we can have the conscious mentality of really being deliberate and decisive when we're faced with a difficult decision, knowing that even if we make a mistake, it's an opportunity to grow, that can help build some grit and resilience also. And a lot of this has to do with mindset. So another thing we can do is try to notice very consciously how we respond to failure. If we can be aware of what happens to us when something doesn't go our way, then we can be much more intentional about how we respond to failure. Part of this has to do with simply reviewing in your past where are times that you've really struggled and how did that go? What happened? Spend a little bit of time reviewing and looking not just at what other people did to you, but how you responded in turn. Decide if you're proud of that. Decide if that's how you want to respond. Decide if that's helping you grow. And try to be really proactive and decisive in the way you respond to failure. Because if resilience is all about bouncing back from failure, we need to see whether or not we're doing that at all. So trying to take stock of how we respond to failure and be decisive in the way we do. Trying to embrace change. And some of these are so big and broad. Change is uncomfortable, almost every time, and it's kind of difficult. But trying to have the mentality that the uncomfort or the awkwardness that may come with certain changes is not inherently bad. Trying to be open to change and interested in it, open to changing ourselves in particular. If we are not afraid of becoming slightly different than we were yesterday, then we're really open to a lot of growth and change, and we can feel optimistic about it. Which brings me to the next point, which is to practice optimism. That doesn't mean pretending that problems don't exist. That's denial, not optimism. But facing the future with a sense of hope and idealism and looking at what could be and how we're going to try and bring good things about in our lives and in the world, as opposed to dwelling on what are the obstacles, what are other people doing that's hindering us, why are we unable to achieve the goals we want, right? That's a very negative mindset that will not help us. It won't help us get anywhere because all we're looking at are the obstacles. If we look at the possibilities, we're much more likely to make progress towards our goals. And then the last one is to avoid negative self-talk. If we're trying to reach a big goal or grow as individuals, we need to be able to give ourselves a break. If you've ever had a boss who was extremely demanding and didn't give you room to make mistakes or learn as you went, but really kind of squashed you down anytime that happened, you probably know that that's not a healthy place to work. We need to be able to learn and grow and make some mistakes along the way. And if we're holding it really hard over our own heads every time we make a mistake, we won't be free to make mistakes. We've got to give ourselves some grace and some room to grow as people. In general, we want to practice taking care of ourselves. And that's not only avoiding negative self-talk, but also practicing self-care. Give yourself a break when you need a break. Maybe have a habit of eating well or exercising. Another thing that really successful people have in common is most of the time they're really pretty healthy, or at least they have habits of taking care of themselves and doing things besides work. So that's part of it as well. There you have it. That's what I had for today. I hope you found this helpful. Thank you very much for watching. Go ahead and subscribe if you haven't, and I will see you next time.